Yeah, I was considering doing this video in the dark because it's already dark out and I feel like the lighting sometimes is weird and artificial when I try to light it up when I film late at night, but this isn't working. Never mind. Hello, my name is Elise, and today I'm going to be reviewing my most anticipated release for 2021, which is Honey Girl by Morgan Rogers. I don't usually do book reviews like this on my channel. I do write book reviews, but not often do I do individualized book reviews like this on BookTube. But I felt like I should do a review on this because, again, it was my most anticipated release for 2021, and it wasn't exactly what I was thinking. Just as a basic summary, this is an adult contemporary LGBT book about a woman named Grace Porter. She's in her late 20s and she's a super perfectionist. She has a PhD in astronomy and she had a whole plan for her life, and things just are not going accordingly to that plan. So she ends up taking a girls' trip to Las Vegas, and instead of being her normal, perfectionist, controlled self, things go a little out of hand and she ends up marrying some stranger in some drunken adventure at Las Vegas. I was originally super drawn to this book because I love the idea of a perfectionist, neurotic main character because that's something I really relate to. And also it's a sapphic book that has some kind of messy romance, and I usually love that. And it's contemporary, another component that I really love in fiction, and also the cover is gorgeous. So I was excited to read this, hoping I could find myself in this book, and at some parts I really did feel seen and I really related to Grace, and other parts I was a little lost on. Alright, just cutting to the chase, I gave Honey Girl 3 stars. This was an anticipated 5-star read for me, and I did not give it 5 stars. I will go through both the pros and cons of this book, because I'm not saying it was either good nor bad. It had elements of both good and bad, and I do think I would still recommend this book. It just wasn't exactly what I was looking for. I'm gonna go through the cons first so that way I can end on the pros, because again, I would like to still recommend this book. I think it would still attract a good audience, but it just wasn't necessarily what I thought it was gonna be. But yeah, it was still good. Okay, let's get into the cons, the parts I didn't like. So I think the main reason that there were parts of this book that I really struggled with was due to the writing style and the pace of the writing. I read this book over the course of a couple weeks, which usually doesn't happen for me. I usually finish books, especially contemporary books, within maybe 2 or 3 days, a week max if I'm busy that week. But yeah, this one took me a really long time to finish. Now, that's not because I was reading the book every single day and I was reading at a slow pace. It was more like I had a really hard time getting into the book, and then after I got to the second half of the book, I finished it in one day. At the beginning of the book, I thought the writing style was pretty difficult to get used to because it was a bit repetitive and there were certain elements to it that I just didn't think was realistic. And I do think in contemporary you can definitely play with your writing and add elements that aren't realistic and have that still contribute to the realness of your story. But I felt like the dialogue was very repetitive and not realistic, but it wasn't not realistic in some artistic way. It just felt like it wasn't how people talk. For example, there are some books that I love that are contemporary that have not very realistic dialogue. For example, I bring up this book all the time, Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. That book is known for being very artsy prose, and the dialogue isn't really realistic. You would not normally hear people talking the way that they do in that book, but it still offers some kind of artistic, stylistic component to the book. Whereas in Honey Girl, I just felt like it didn't add anything except distract me because I was paying attention to the structure of the dialogue. For example, the character is named Grace Porter. So many times in the book, the character is called Grace Porter or just by her last name Porter. And that might sound like a really insignificant detail in a review like this one if you haven't read the book, but it was incredibly distracting while reading the book. Imagine the name Porter just in every single sentence. And while I did think that was super repetitive, I just also can't imagine people really talking like that. If you think about it, you don't really say people's names in casual conversation that often. Maybe at the beginning to address someone, but you really don't say people's names consistently over the course of whatever conversation you're having. And again, I know that sounds like a minor detail, but something about that writing style really was hard for me to get into, and I just wasn't enjoying it too much. But yeah, I definitely pushed through because I was really looking forward to this book and I didn't want a minorish detail like that to deter me from finishing it. But there were some little tidbits that I did think were really beautiful for the writing style. So along with the writing style not being my favorite at first and it being kind of slow at the beginning and maybe slightly boring, another component that I wasn't a big fan of was the romance. And that was really surprising to me because even though I'm fine with books that aren't purely romance, and I actually tend to prefer them, I was expecting this book to be a romance, and I don't want to rate this book based on how it was marketed, because sometimes summaries of books, when you're looking at them at the back of a book or on Goodreads, they can be misleading sometimes. That's not always the fault of the author. So I wasn't trying to have my previous assumptions about the book affect my enjoyment of the book, but I did feel like that the relationship was not explored in the way that I thought would benefit the book. So the main character, as I already mentioned, ends up marrying this girl that she doesn't know. It was just some drunken thing that she did in Las Vegas. And I really thought that was going to be a more central part to the book, and it was. Grace definitely still interacts with her now wife, but I just really thought that there was going to be more to it. I really wanted to see more of their interactions and conversations and how they dealt with this whole surprising event of them being married, even though they didn't know each other before. And yeah, I just thought it was going to be explored more, and there were things that were touched upon in their relationship, and I just kept finding myself wanting more. So those were the two main reasons why I didn't fall in love with Honey Girl like I was expecting to. It was the writing style, which was a bit unrealistic, but not really in the artistic way, and that just paired with a slow, slightly boring beginning. And the other component was the relationship, because even though there was clearly some romance going on, I was really waiting for more exploration between those two characters. The other detail I'm going to bring up that I didn't really like was there was mentionings of self-harm in this book. The main character, Grace, does engage in self-harm, and I'm putting a trigger warning for that, but also I just felt like that was something that should be addressed more. And while there was, I think, either one or two characters that tell Grace, hey, you're hurting yourself, stop, I just really wanted that to be addressed more, because I felt like that was something serious, and it was kind of just brushed off as a more minor detail in her bigger overarching mental health problem. And even though it was just another detail in her mental health journey, I just thought it was a pretty serious detail and that it should have been elaborated on more. And then let's get into some of the pros, because I did like this book even though it wasn't exactly my favorite book like I was expecting it to. So for the pros, I thought the best part of Honey Girl was the representation for mental health. I was not expecting this component to be what I loved so much about Honey Girl, but I really loved the way that depression and relationship with perfectionism and your career was portrayed, along with not exactly knowing how to express those feelings and who you can talk to about them. Grace struggles with a lot of stress that comes from her career and her expectations that her parents hold above her, and also her new wife, but it's a lot for her to handle all at once. And then there's details about racial bias and gender bias, and just a lot is going on for Grace that she is trying to keep inside her and not let anyone know that she's struggling. At the end, there's some therapy, and I really appreciated those scenes. So overall, if you're looking for a book that is good at depicting mental health, this is definitely for you. Another part that I really enjoyed was the fact that there were many diverse characters, and the side characters were super fun. I loved all of their distinct personalities, and I'm gonna be honest, I am someone who often prefers side characters to the central characters, and I really thought that the side characters in this book were unique and funny and really had distinct personalities, and I really appreciated that because it really brought the book together. There are characters from many different parts of Grace's life, and I thought that was interesting to see too, because it really gave the reader a full scope of what was going on in Grace's life. And then the last thing that I really loved in this book was the depictions of family relationships. Grace does not have the best relationship with her parents, or at least you could say it was pretty strained, and her parents had different expectations for her that were kind of hard for her to uphold. I really loved the idea of how Grace was trying to please her parents, but also were kind of mad at her parents, and I thought that that was something that a lot of people could probably relate to, but it was very clearly explored in this book. And if anything, this book was more about family and friendship and just relationships in general rather than actual romance. So yeah, those would be my main takeaways from this book. I did give it 3 stars, but do keep in mind that for me, that's a pretty neutral rating. It means that it has both good components and bad components. So even though I didn't give it the 5 stars I was expecting, it was still a good book. I would still definitely recommend it to people who like books that explore mental health topics and family and friends, because that's what this book really excels with. However, if you're looking for super fantastic, lovely writing, maybe not this book, but I don't want to say it was terrible, because it wasn't terrible writing, and this is the author's first book. So I'm looking forward to see what other books Morgan Rogers publishes, because this was definitely a great start as a debut. I just think that there could be some improvements, but clearly nothing that can't be fixed, and I definitely think by a second book this could all be improved greatly, and I can't wait to read what is next. So thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you plan to read Honey Girl in the near future, or if you've already had. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye. I thought